Assalamualaikum dan salam sejahtera. Anda bersama saya Rozman dan sebentar sahaja lagi rakan tugas Nabilah, Khaleeda dan Tehmina Kaoosji akan mintai kami dan saya akan mulakan dengan laporan pertama. Malaysia komited mengukuhkan lagi kerjasama dalam pelbagai bidang terutama perdagangan dan pelaburan dengan negara-negara ASEAN. Malah Perdana Menteri Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim akui kerjasama dengan negara jiran seperti Thailand, Singapura dan Indonesia juga perlu dipertingkatkan. Perkara itu dinyatakan Anwar dalam ucapan alu-aluan di Majlis Berbuka Puasa Madani bersama para duta, perwakilan asing, ketua organisasi antarabangsa serta pelajar dari Mahat Tahfiz Sulaimaniyah Kajang di Kompleks Seri Perdana pada Khamis. Mengulas kerjasama dengan Thailand, beliau berkata antara kerjasama yang perlu dipertingkat seperti bidang perdagangan, pelaburan dan pelancongan. Beliau berharap dan menanti untuk bekerjasama dengan Perdana Menteri Thailand serta Tavisen dalam bidang lain. Malah Kementerian Luar juga akan membantu Thailand bagi memastikan kerjasama antara ASEAN serta hubungan dua hala dengan negara jiran diperkukuhkan. Thailand ialah rakan dagang ketujuh terbesar Malaysia di peringkat global dengan jumlah dagangan sebanyak 113.16 bilion ringgit dicatatkan pada 2023. Anwar juga berkata selain Thailand, Malaysia juga bekerjasama dengan Singapura dalam melengkapkan zon ekonomi khas Johor Singapura dengan perjanjian bersama antara kedua-dua negara dijangka ditandatangani pada akhir tahun ini. Zon ini akan memberi manfaat kepada selatan Malaysia dan juga Singapura. Pada 14 Mac, Kementerian Ekonomi mengumumkan Malaysia dan Singapura dijangka menandatangani perjanjian bersama itu semasa pemukiman pemimpin Malaysia-Singapura ke-11 pada akhir tahun ini. Mengulas lanjut mengenai kerjasama Malaysia dalam ASEAN, Anwar yang juga Menteri Kewangan berkata Malaysia akan memperluas dan mengukuhkan lagi kerjasama dalam beberapa bidang seperti peralihan tenaga, transformasi digital, kesihatan awam dan pendidikan. Pada 2023, rakan dagang utama Malaysia ialah ASEAN, China, Amerika Syarikat, Kesatuan Eropah dan Jepun mewakili 67.7% bahagian daripada jumlah perdagangan Malaysia. Sains Darbi berhad mengumumkan proses pengambilalihan 100% kepentingan dalam UMW Holdings Berhad UMW yang telah berjaya disempurnakan dan kini UMW merupakan anak syarikat milik penuh Sains Darbi Berhad. Ketua Pegawai Eksekutif Sains Darbi Group, Datuk Jeffrey Salim Davidson berkata peristiwa penting itu adalah petunjuk yang jelas tentang kepercayaan pasaran terhadap hala tuju strategik kumpulan dan nilai yang akan diwujudkan dengan penyertaan UMW.
Keutamaan pihaknya sekarang ialah untuk menyempurnakan penyepaduan UMW ke dalam ekosistem Sains Darbi yang lebih luas termasuk memanfaatkan kekuatan bersama terutamanya dalam sektor automotif dan perindustrian. Ujar beliau ini akan membolehkan syarikat itu mengukuhkan kelebihan daya saing serta meluaskan jejak domestik untuk terus memacu pertumbuhan jangka panjang. Jeffrey Salim berkata, pengambilalihan itu juga sejajar dengan pelan induk strategi 5 tahun Sains Darbi untuk mengembangkan perniagaan industri dan permotoran merentasi pasaran utama serantau dan mengukuhkan sumbangan pendapatannya dari Malaysia. Dengan pengambilalihan penting ini, Sains Darbi Berhad memperbaharui komitmennya untuk memacu inovasi dan pertumbuhan sambil menyumbang kepada pembangunan ekonomi Malaysia. Sementara itu, Pengarah Urusan UMW Mustamir Mohamad berkata, dengan menyertai keluarga Sains Darbi sebagai salah satu unit perniagaan penting, ia jelas menandakan lembaran baharu yang menarik, membolehkannya memanfaatkan peluang-peluang baharu dan berkongsi kepakaran. Sains Darbi pada Ogos 2023 telah mengambil alih 61.2% kepentingan dalam UMW daripada syarikat induknya Permodalan Nasional Berhad pada harga 3.57 bilion ringgit diikuti dengan tawaran mandatori untuk membeli bagi kepentingan equity sebanyak 38.8% pada harga kira-kira 2.27 bilion ringgit.
Kehadiran Ramadan yang mulia turut menjadi pintu rezeki buat ramai peniaga minuman dan makanan di luar sana. Namun satu faktor yang kerap berlaku adalah pembaziran. Di Bazar Ramadan contohnya sebanyak 8.1 tan metrik makanan dan minuman dengan anggaran nilai RM116,000 berjaya diselamatkan di Bazar Ramadan seluruh negara menerusi program MySaveFood dalam tempoh 6 hari puasa tahun ini. Dan bagi membincangkan perkara ini, kita bersama Timbalan Menteri Perdagangan Dalam Negeri dan Kos Sara Hidup, YB Senator Fauziah Saleh. Saya nak ucapkan terima kasih YB kerana sudi meluangkan masa bersama kami pada jam ini. YB, pertama sekali, mungkin YB boleh kongsikan berkenaan inisiatif ini. Bagaimana inisiatif MySaveFood ini bermula dan siapa golongan sasar dan sebab utama ia dilaksanakan?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. Terima kasih Nina kerana menjemput saya ke AWANI Niaga pada pagi ini. Jadi saya bersiaran daripada Sarawak ya, sebab saya di sini hari ini untuk juga melihat kepada Bazar Ramadan Rahmah dan juga inisiatif MySaveFood di Kuching, Sarawak. Saya nak cerita sikit berkenaan dengan MySaveFood ini, di mana ianya bermula oleh pada 6 tahun kebelakangan, 6 tahun lepas, dimulakan oleh satu pasukan ataupun satu kumpulan anak muda, namanya Pemuda Gema, di mana mereka mengambil inisiatif untuk menyelamatkan makanan lebihan daripada Bazar Ramadan. Jadi selepas mereka beroperasi ya, mereka adalah anak muda yang profesional saya lihat. Akan tetapi mereka mempunyai masalah sedikit untuk apa orang kata nak advocate, nak membuatkan peniaga-peniaga beri kerjasama kepada mereka. Jadi pada tahun 2023, tahun lepas, apabila mereka dapat tahu yang saya nak juga mempunyai hasrat yang sama untuk menyelamatkan makanan daripada Bazar Ramadan yang apa orang kata surplus ya, yang baik, yang kita nak elak pembaziran dan apa kata justru itu juga membantu kos hari hidup ya orang yang susah. Jadi mereka mendekati saya. Dan pada tahun 2023, Ramadan 2023, kita lantik, KPDN melantik Pemuda Gema sebagai rakan strategik ya. Dan kita beri mereka platform, kita beri mereka laluan untuk di Bazar Ramadan ya, di bawah seliaan kami, linkkan mereka dengan pihak berkuasa tempatan, ya, bantu mereka dalam advokasi dengan kesatuan penjaja dan sebagainya. Dan apa yang kita lihat pada tahun lepas adalah satu kejayaan, di mana di pilot project tahun lepas di 55 Bazar Ramadan kita telah berjaya mengumpulkan 25 tan makanan ya yang surplus bernilai lebih RM281,000. Jadi tahun ini Nina, kita mahu membawa program MySaveFood ini ke tahap yang lebih tinggi. Jadi apa yang kita buat ialah KPDN, di bawah KPDN kita ada gerakan pengguna siswa ataupun kelab pengguna di kalangan siswa yang juga selalunya bertanggungjawab untuk food bank di college-college universiti mereka. Jadi kita minta Pemuda Gema untuk mentor, melatih sukarelawan-sukarelawan daripada kelab gerakan pengguna siswa ini. Jadi kita berjaya menggerakkan 2,700 sukarelawan tahun ini dan melibatkan 35 IPTA dan IPTS. Jadi dan akhirnya apabila ada berlebihan makanan yang tidak terjual yang baik tu, kita akan hantar antara penerima manfaatnya ialah pelajar sendiri, kerana pelajar pun ada ramai daripada golongan asnaf ya, B40, dan kalau ada berlebihan lagi, ada banyak ya kutipan itu akan dihantar kepada PPR kawasan B40 dan sebagainya. Jadi ini dapat membantu dua masalah jadi satu penyelesaian. Satu masalah ialah pembaziran, di mana KAP menyatakan bahawa di bulan Ramadan pembaziran itu meningkat, pembaziran makanan meningkat dengan 20%. Tahun lepas 90,000 metrik tan makanan dibazirkan di Bazar Ramadan. Ini laporan KAP. Jadi itu satu masalah. Satu masalah lagi, kita ada orang susah. Kita ada pelajar-pelajar yang golongan asnaf dan sebagainya. Jadi dua masalah ni menjadi solution ya. Pembaziran itu kita selesaikan dan kesusahan pelajar itu juga kita selesaikan. Itulah dia cerita di sebalik MySaveFood ini. Jadi Pemuda Gema sekarang rakan strategik kami dan memainkan peranan untuk melatih sukarelawan-sukarelawan supaya kita dapat membantu selamatkan sebanyak mana makanan daripada dibazirkan daripada Bazar Ramadan.
Dan itu adalah serba sedikit latar belakang bagaimana MySaveFood program diwujudkan. Sudah tentu ia amat membanggakan kalau kita mendengar iaitu kisah anak-anak muda golongan belia yang turut terlibat dan menyertai dalam memperkasakan usaha ini. Dan tadi YB ada kongsikan iaitu antara lebihan-lebihan makanan yang dihantar. Tetapi kita nak lihat bagaimana SOP yang ditetapkan KPDN dalam memastikan kualiti makanan terus terjamin.
Okey. Sebelum itu saya nak, tadi Nina sebut ya 8.1 tan diselamatkan selepas 6 hari. Jadi pada semalam kita sudah pun habis 9 hari dan data pada 9 hari ini kita selamatkan 14,530 metrik tan ya di 35 Bazar Ramadan dan nilai dalam RM186 Malaysia. Tapi yang paling menarik ya Nina, kita juga mengira greenhouse gas emission yang kita selamatkan. Dan setakat ini kita selamatkan dalam 15,482 kilogram greenhouse emission daripada dikeluarkan ya. Jadi bagaimana SOP ni dilaksanakan? Sebelum berbuka puasa, apa sukarelawan ni akan buat? Mereka akan pergi ke gerai-gerai dan selepas mereka engage dengan persatuan penjaja akan bantu mereka dan mereka pergi ke gerai-gerai dan buat advokasi dan mereka akan beri penerangan supaya jangan buang makanan yang baik, yang surplus ya, supaya mereka dapat kutip. KPDN pula menyediakan geras ya, di mana pengumpulan makanan dan jadi dengan kerjasama persatuan penjaja, dengan kerjasama PBT dan KPDN, mudah bagi penjaja untuk memberi surplus makanan tadi yang tidak dijual. Jadi dalam 15 minit sebelum berbuka puasa lebih kurang itu, kadang-kadang peniaga yang nak tutup awal dia hantar sendiri. Dia hantar sendiri kepada yang kita sediakan tadi, tempat pengumpulan tersebut. Dan di masa yang sama, sukarelawan-sukarelawan kita pergi ke gerai-gerai dan mengutip makanan ya daripada peniaga-peniaga. Lagi 15 minit nak buka puasa, mereka dah tutup gerai, ada 5 bungkus murtabak, gerai lagi satu ada 10 bungkus air, gerai lagi satu ada 3 bungkus nasi ayam, contohnya begitu. Mereka akan kumpulkan, mereka akan bawa ke gerai tempat pengumpulan. Di situ makanan tersebut akan ditimbang. Ianya akan ditimbang dan nilai makanan tersebut akan diletakkan dalam satu carta. Ditimbang berapa kilo yang diselamatkan, nilai yang diselamatkan. Ya, kemudian akan juga dikira greenhouse gas emission yang diselamatkan. Jadi apabila telah ditimbang, ianya akan diletakkan label. Kalau sekiranya makanan itu dalam bentuk dalam jumlah yang besar, contohnya mi kawah tu, ada setengah kawah lagi dimasuk dalam beg plastik, mereka akan repack. Mereka akan repack kepada portion untuk individu. Dan selepas itu dah cantik-cantik packing tu, mereka akan letak label. Di label itu ada tertulis lihat, hidu, rasa. Dan juga di situ diberi arahan bahawa makanan tersebut perlu dimakan sebelum 11 malam atau dimakan 2 jam selepas diterima oleh penerima. Dan sekiranya ada masalah berkenaan dengan kerosakan dan sebagainya, sebab mereka dah check ya sebelum di-pack, tapi juga diberitahu kepada penerima kalau ada masalah, di situ ada QR code untuk mengadu supaya kita punya sukarelawan tahu sama ada makanan itu rosak atau tidak. Jadi setakat ini ya dah berapa banyak kita buat ni, alhamdulillah belum ada satu pun aduan lagi. Dan setakat ini alhamdulillah kita melihat bahawa penerima amat bergembiralah dan kualiti makanan itu terjaga dan saya sendiri melihat kepadanya dan memang alhamdulillah kualiti makanan itu terjaga dan ianya dibungkus dengan baik ya, dengan penuh kasih sayang ya Nina, dan kemudian disampaikan kepada masyarakat yang memerlukan.
Kita apa yang menariknya YB kongsikan tadi, usaha-usaha ini juga menitik beratkan kelestarian dengan mengambil berat aspek greenhouse gas emission dan kita lihat iaitu SOP yang telah dikongsikan oleh YB itu jelas dan bukan jelas saja tapi dengan seperti YB sendiri cakap penuh kasih sayang. Dan kita nak lihat sekarang ni terpulang kepada peniaga dan juga sukarelawan itu sendiri untuk memainkan peranan mereka. Jadi bagaimana kesediaan di peringkat peniaga terutamanya untuk menjayakan inisiatif ini? Dah 9 hampir 10 hari berpuasa dan mungkin kita nak lihat juga semangat mereka dan keupayaan mereka dalam 20 hari balance untuk kita berpuasa ni. Adakah apa-apa insentif untuk peniaga ini YB?
Okey Nina, saya katakan tadi apabila pemuda gemar bermula 6 tahun lepas ya, dan sebelum mereka menjadi rakan kongsi strategik kepada KPDN, mereka punya masalah untuk meyakinkan peniaga bahawa mereka ini adalah dengan niat yang baik, mereka ini merupakan NGO yang berdaftar. Susah mereka nak yakinkan peniaga-peniaga. Tapi alhamdulillah apabila bekerjasama dengan kerajaan dan kementerian seperti KPDN yang jaga kos sehari hidup ini, mereka memahami apa tu hasrat KPDN dan NGO ini dan peniaga-peniaga beri kerjasama yang baik. Ya, peniaga beri kerjasama yang baik dan kita dapati bahawa it is a win-win situation ya Nina. Kalau kita tengok dulu adalah beberapa hari lepas viral yang berkenaan dengan air balang tu. Air balang yang dibuang apabila tak habis. Jadi di situ peniaga dia menyumbang kepada pembaziran. Tetapi di sini kita membantu mereka supaya tidak membazir, tidak membuang surplus ataupun lebihan yang tidak dapat dijual tapi masih baik. Jadi peniaga alhamdulillah apabila mereka yakin bahawa kementerian menyokong penuh dan mereka yakin bahawa apa orang kata ini inisiatif ini amat baik dan penerimanya juga jelas, maka alhamdulillah peniaga beri kerjasama yang amat baik. Ada juga peniaga yang buat lebih sengaja untuk sedekah. Ya, dan mereka nak pastikan ada surplus sebab mereka kata mereka nak sedekah kerana mereka nak apa orang kata keberkatan tersebut. Ada yang memang surplus. Jadi alhamdulillah tak ada inisiatif, tak ada insentif yang kita keluarkan, cuma peluang untuk apa orang kata menyumbang, peluang untuk mengelakkan pembaziran, peluang untuk mendapat keberkatan daripada usaha, sama-sama mendapat keberkatan daripada usaha ni.
Untuk amal jariah sudah tentu YB, dan tahun lepas 55 bazar Ramadan terlibat. Bagaimana pula dengan tahun ini dan apa mungkin hasrat YB untuk tahun-tahun akan datang untuk menjayakan lagi inisiatif murni seperti ini? Silakan YB. Baik, kita akan masalahnya ada masalah teknikal dan kita akan cuba dapatkan YB dalam talian. Baik, kita masih lagi bersama, iaitu kita tengah masih menunggu iaitu respon daripada YB kerana kita ada masalah teknikal ketika ini, dan sekarang ini okey, kita seperti yang saya difahamkan YB sudah kembali ke dalam talian. YB boleh dengar suara saya YB?
Ya, alhamdulillah Nina, you are back.
Okay, I'm back. Okay, tadi ada masalah teknikal sikit. Line kita terputus YB. Berbakikan 2 minit, mungkin YB boleh kongsikan tahun lepas ada 55 bazar Ramadan yang terlibat. Bagaimana pula dengan tahun ini dan apa mungkin hasrat YB untuk tahun-tahun akan datang dalam menjayakan inisiatif murni ini?
Okey Nina, tahun lepas 55 bazar ya. Tahun ni kita nak meningkatkan kepada 75 bazar. Tetapi yang lebih menariknya Nina, kita melibatkan 35 gerakan pengguna siswa daripada 35 IPTA dan IPTS. 19 IPTA dan 16 IPS terlibat sama dengan gerakan yang ada gerakan pengguna siswa terlibat sama dalam MySaveFood. Jadi ini adalah satu usaha yang murni di mana kita tengok anak muda kita yang menjadi pelajar universiti terlibat sama dalam kerja-kerja sukarelawan ini, dan saya yakin bahawa ini adalah satu perkara yang baik yang mereka terlibat dalam aktiviti-aktiviti kebajikan dan kemasyarakatan seperti ini yang boleh membentuk mereka yang menjadi ahli masyarakat yang prihatin di masa hadapan. Jadi hasrat saya Nina, kalau bolehlah bukan setakat 75 bazar Ramadan saja yang kita santuni. Kalau boleh semua bazar Ramadan kita santuni supaya kita elakkan pembaziran. Kalau boleh ada sukarelawan daripada NGO lain yang turut serta. Hubungi kami supaya kami akan bawa mereka on board. Ada masa lagi untuk kita sama-sama santuni pembaziran di bazar Ramadan. Saya juga Nina berhasrat kalau boleh kita tadi saya kata saya nak lihat kalau boleh semua bazar Ramadan ini kita santuni. Dan kalau selepas Ramadan, selepas raya macam mana pula? Kita ada pasar malam. Bagaimana mungkin kita membantu mengelakkan pembaziran di pasar malam juga? Bagaimana mungkin pembaziran tersebut boleh kita salurkan untuk menjadi bantuan pula kepada yang memerlukan. Kalau bukan saja makanan, mungkin sayur-sayuran. Ya, mungkin sayuran yang tak boleh simpan sampai esoknya. Mungkin boleh disalurkan selepas pada pasar malam itu tutup. Jadi itulah hasrat saya. Saya harap ramai yang kalau yang mendengar itu dapat menterjemahkan di dalam apa orang kata satu tingkah laku yang boleh kita teruskan untuk ada banyak seperti saya katakan tadi untuk membantu juga kos sara hidup di kalangan mereka-mereka yang susah dan yang memerlukan. Jadi insya-Allah kalau sama-sama kita jayakan ini, kita akan apa orang kata pasar malam bazar ni ada lebih 1,000 seluruh negara. Kita hanya dapat buat di 75 sahaja. Dan lagi ramai yang terlibat, insya-Allah lagi banyak kita boleh selamatkan.
Itulah ada harapan kita semua di sini. YB, mungkin saya nak tambah sikit lagi tadi. YB ada cakap YB di Sarawak ketika ini, dan sebelum ini YB dekat Sungai Besar dan juga Kampung Baru. Mungkin YB boleh kongsikan apa yang YB nak capai dengan turun padang sebegini?
Apabila kita turun padang ini, saya menyantuni, saya lihat masalah, saya lihat sendiri bagaimana mereka melaksanakannya, saya ikut SOP, saya faham, dan saya juga lihat apa yang kita boleh buat lebih daripada ini. Sebab Nina, di dalam kita menjayakan aktiviti seperti ini, Nina, dia memerlukan political will, dia memerlukan kehendak politik yang sungguh-sungguh, dan saya rasa saya di dalam kedudukan yang boleh provide ataupun menyediakan apa orang kata drive tersebut, dan bersama-sama kerjasama kita dengan media seperti AWANI yang membantu untuk mengangkat agenda ini, saya rasa kita boleh pergi lebih jauh. Sebab itu saya committed dan saya mengajak semua untuk turut serta, dan terima kasih kepada pihak media kerana menyokong, membantu dan mengangkat agenda yang sama. Sebab saya yakin bahawa kita sama-sama boleh mengangkat agenda madani ini, kerana ihsan itu sebahagian satu daripada apa orang kata tiang di dalam madani, konsep madani kita dalam kerajaan madani ini. Jadi sama-sama kita jayakan, insya-Allah. Jadi saya nak cerita di Sarawak ni kita ada 86 sukarelawan. Saya tengok sukarelawan berapa banyak, dan kalau di Sarawak ni kita rahmah for all. Yang terima bukan orang Islam saja. Kalau kita perlu pergi ke rumah panjang pun kita akan hantar ke rumah panjang. Jadi itu hasrat itu begitu. Dan insya-Allah supaya kita apa orang kata dapat sama-samalah realisasikan hasrat yang murni ini.
Dan saya berharap iaitu perjalanan YB untuk turun padang dan lihat sendiri situasi dan realiti di Bazar Ramadan di Sarawak berjalan dengan lancar. Dan kita berharap juga program MySaveFood ni akan terus dapat membantu masyarakat dari pihak peniaga dan juga pihak pembeli agar kita dapat terus mengelakkan pembaziran. Dan sudah tentu perbincangan ini akan kami rangkumkan dalam astroawani.com dan semua platform digital Astro Awani. Banyak lagi laporan yang akan kami bawakan selepas ini.
Di dalam setiap berita yang dibawa, konteks amat penting. Cara kita mendapat berita kian berubah. Melalui media sosial maupun saluran digital yang lain serta kaca TV. Kami sentiasa membawakan yang tergempar dan terkini.
Kita buat sesuatu yang berbeza.
Teraskan acuan verifikasi yang diamalkan supaya setiap fakta adalah sahih. Daripada analisis pelbagai sudut yang mendalam, laporan-laporan khas dan perbincangan yang membina negara. Inklusif, suara rakyat kami ajukan. Keseimbangan persepsi kami pastikan. Kerana setiap cerita mempunyai impak yang tersendiri dan perlu dibawa dengan penelitian yang terperinci. Pastikan Astro Awani menjadi pilihan anda tidak kira di mana sahaja anda berada. Saluran berita paling dipercayai di Malaysia.
Baik, kita akan teruskan dengan perkembangan iaitu The Federal Reserve yang telah mengekalkan kadar faedahnya, dan kita lihat bagaimanakah ia memberi impak kepada ringgit dan juga ekonomi negara. Dan kita mempersilakan tetamu kita yang sudah bersedia dalam talian adalah Abdul Muiz Morhali, merupakan pakar ekonomi MIDF Research. Saya nak ucapkan terima kasih Muiz. Dan kita lihat pagi semalam Federal Reserve memutuskan kadar Fed Funds dikekalkan pada paras tinggi iaitu 5.25 hingga 5.50% kerana inflasi di US sebenarnya masih tinggi. Adakah keputusan ini sama ataupun menyamai pengututan suara di pasaran ketika ini, dan apa komen Muiz mengenai keputusan yang dibuat oleh Fed itu?
Baik, terima kasih Nina. Keputusan Fed untuk mengekalkan kadar faedahnya pada para sedia ada adalah seperti yang dijangka oleh pasaran. Kami di MIDF Research juga tidak menjangka akan berlaku sebarang perubahan, terutamanya pada separuh pertama tahun ini, melihat kepada kekuatan ekonomi di Amerika Syarikat dengan peningkatan perbelanjaan dan juga keadaan pasaran buruh yang masih dikira agak ketat. Walaupun begitu, antara perkara yang menjadi berita baik bagi para pemerhati pasaran ialah dari segi mesej terbaru Fed, iaitu Fed sekurang-kurangnya masih menunjukkan kadar faedahnya akan dipotong sebanyak 3 kali pada tahun ini, iaitu menyamai jangkaan pasaran yang mana pasaran kebanyakannya menjangka Fed akan mula menurunkan kadar faedahnya tahun ini. Jadi tiada kejutan besar sebenarnya daripada apa yang diumumkan oleh Fed baru-baru ini. Ia juga satu perkara yang memberangsakan apabila ahli jawatan kuasa pasar terbuka Fed juga berpendapat ekonomi Amerika Syarikat diunjuk akan berkembang pada paras normal, iaitu sekitar 2 ke 2.1% pada tahun ini dan juga tahun hadapan. Ini bermakna prospek pertumbuhan ekonomi Amerika masih kekal memberangsangkan. Dengan inflasi yang kekal tinggi walaupun lebih sederhana berbanding sebelumnya, kesan ke atas ekonomi daripada kenaikan kadar faedah yang agak agresif sebelum ini dijangka tidak akan memberi kesan yang buruk ataupun kesan yang signifikan kepada pertumbuhan ekonomi di sana.
Ada kejutan besar yang telah diumumkan, namun ia tetap adalah keputusan yang memberangsangkan kepada pelbagai aspek yang telah dikongsikan oleh Muiz. Dan bolehkah kita katakan bahawa Fed telah mencapai paras yang maksimum dalam usaha mengetatkan dasar moneterinya, dan Fed selepas ini dijangka akan memotong kadar faedahnya? Mungkin Muiz boleh kongsikan juga, adakah para pembuat dasar Fed mengubah pandangan mereka mengenai unjuran pergerakan kadar faedah di Amerika Syarikat tahun ini, atau mereka mahu untuk terus kekalkan faedah faedah itu yang tinggi buat jangka masa yang lebih lama?
Kami tidak menjangka akan berlaku sebarang lagi kenaikan kadar faedah. Dalam kata lain, Fed telah mencapai paras maksimum dari segi penetapan kadar moneterinya. Tadi saya menyatakan unjuran ekonomi Fed dinaikkan kerana ekonomi Amerika masih berkembang dengan sihat tahun lalu, walaupun kadar faedah dinaikkan dengan agresif sebanyak 500 mata asas dari sekitar sifar kepada lebih 5%. Pergerakan inflasi masih menjadi fokus utama bagi saya kerana Fed melihat usaha ataupun tindakan untuk mengetatkan polisi adalah bertujuan bagi mengawal tekanan inflasi. Jangkaan terkini Fed menunjukkan inflasi PCE Trust yang menjadi fokus utama telah pun menurun kepada 2.8% dan ini dijangka akan kekal tinggi, walaupun jangkaan Fed ia akan terus menyederhana ke sekitar 2.6% tahun ini. Namun dengan jangkaan inflasi yang lebih sederhana, bagi saya ini menjelaskan kenapa ahli FOMC sendiri tidak membuat sebarang perubahan bagi unjuran kadar Fed Funds Rate kerana yang dijangka akan diturunkan kepada 4.6%. Ini bermakna FOMC tidak masih berpendapat dengan keadaan inflasi yang terkawal. Ini memberi ruang untuk Fed untuk mengurangkan kadar faedahnya. Cuma dari segi persoalan yang menjadi tumpuan pasaran sekarang ini ialah bila keputusan ini akan buat. Bagi saya, jangkaan Fed Funds Rate ini akan diturunkan pada separuh kedua kerana mengambil kira jangkaan inflasi yang sederhana, walaupun mungkin kita akan lihat kedudukan ekonomi yang kuat mungkin akan melewatkan lagi keputusan untuk memotong kadar faedah ini.
Dengan petunjuk dari Fed juga bahawa kadar faedah di US dijangka akan dipotong tahun ini dan beberapa mata wang asing termasuk ringgit mengukuh semalam ke paras 4.71 berbanding 4.73 sebelumnya. Adakah ini is a good sign yang ringgit akan terus mengukuh? Bagaimana untuk kita lihat kenyataan Bank Negara mengenai nilai ringgit yang diunjur akan meningkat berbanding dolar Amerika tahun ini? Adakah ia mampu membina sentimen positif untuk menyokong pergerakan ringgit selepas ini, Muiz?
Dari segi komen yang dibuat oleh Bank Negara termasuk pihak kerajaan, memang ini satu usaha yang baik bagi itu untuk menggalakkan lebih banyak aliran masuk dana asing ke pasaran tempatan. Dan ini jelas menjadi punca utama kenapa kita lihat pengukuhan nilai ringgit daripada hujung Februari ke pertengahan bulan Mac. Dan seperti yang dinyatakan oleh Menteri Kewangan kedua dan juga apa yang dinyatakan oleh Bank Negara, terdapat usaha sama bagi menggalakkan syarikat berkaitan kerajaan untuk membawa pulang pulangan pelaburan mereka, iaitu menukar kepada ringgit. Dan seterusnya saya percaya ini mampu untuk membina lebih banyak keyakinan bagi menyokong kedudukan mata wang tempatan. Cuma seperti yang saya katakan tadi, kekuatan ekonomi di Amerika Syarikat itu mungkin akan melewatkan keputusan Fed untuk memotong kadar faedahnya. Dan kita dapati malam tadi juga pergerakan ringgit melemah sedikit disebabkan keadaan ataupun situasi ekonomi di Amerika Syarikat nampaknya masih bertambah baik. Dan sekiranya sentimen positif ini, kalau secara kasar kita memang dapati keputusan kebanyakan bank pusat menaikkan kadar faedah menjadi antara sebab kenapa ringgit melemah tahun lalu. Dan disebabkan jangkaan Fed akan mula memotong kadar faedahnya tahun ini dan kita tidak menjangka bank negara akan membuat sebarang perubahan bagi OPR, ini menjadi antara sebab kenapa kita menjangka ringgit akan terus mengukuh. Dan fundamental ekonomi yang masih positif, dijangka selain dari segi pemulihan ekspor dan juga imbangan akaun masing-masing yang akan dijangka lebih tinggi tahun ini, turut sama akan memberi sokongan yang baik kepada ringgit untuk mengukuh berbanding dolar tahun ini.
Dan selain laporan tahunan BNM 2023, Bank Negara juga berkongsi unjuran pertumbuhan 4 hingga 5% KDNK bagi tahun 2024 tahun ini dalam laporan ekonomi dan monetary 2023. Adakah kita patut menjangkakan sebarang perubahan mengenai unjuran pertumbuhan ekonomi rasmi berbanding julat yang diunjurkan dalam bajet 2024?
Seperti yang Nina sebutkan, antara perkara ataupun tumpuan utama yang kita lihat daripada segi perbincangan ataupun pembintangan laporan tahunan Bank Negara adalah melihat kepada unjuran pertumbuhan ekonomi negara yang dijangka akan meningkat kepada 4 ke 5% tahun ini berbanding 3.7% tahun lalu. Ini mengambil kira naratif ataupun jangkaan pemulihan perdagangan luar selain peningkatan yang mampan dalam perbelanjaan domestik. Bagi saya ini bukanlah satu kejutan kerana ini adalah satu rumusan yang lebih kurang sama dengan apa yang dilihat oleh para pemerhati ekonomi di pasaran. Saya tertarik dengan pendapat Bank Negara yang melihat kepada keyakinan perbelanjaan pengguna dijangka akan lebih kuat, iaitu dengan unjuran pertumbuhan yang lebih tinggi iaitu pada paras 5.7% berbanding 4.7% tahun lalu. Saya setuju kita dapati melihat kepada jumlah pengajian telah bertambah tinggi berbanding jumlah pengajian yang kita lihat sebelum ekonomi dihimpit oleh pandemik. Dan cuma dari segi pihak saya, seperti yang saya ada nyatakan pada minggu lalu, sentimen pengguna yang tidak merangsangkan perlu diberi perhatian kerana kita dapati para pengguna masih menyatakan kebimbangan tentang tekanan inflasi. Cuma saya berharap kita masih mampu akan melihat pertumbuhan positif dari segi perbelanjaan pengguna yang turut sama akan memberi sokongan kepada pertumbuhan yang lebih baik ekonomi negara pada tahun ini.
Muiz, kita berbakikan seminit sahaja lagi. Bagaimana pula dengan unjuran inflasi? Kerana BNM mengunjurkan jumlah inflasi tahun ini sekitar 2 hingga 3.5% bagi tahun ini, iaitu mungkin lebih tinggi berbanding inflasi 2.5% yang dicatat tahun lalu. Adakah kita perlu bersedia inflasi akan lebih tinggi dan adakah BNM dijangka akan menaikkan kadar OPR tahun ini?
Memang secara kasar kita lihat julat yang diunjurkan 2 ke 3.5% itu adalah besar. Ini mengambil kira kemungkinan tekanan inflasi yang mungkin meningkat akibat perubahan dasar yang bakal dibuat oleh kerajaan, termasuk juga dengan keputusan untuk menguatkuasakan sistem subsidi bersasar, dan kemungkinan kenaikan harga minyak petrol dan diesel mungkin menyumbang kepada kenaikan harga ataupun tekanan inflasi. Cuma disebabkan kita memahami tekanan ini berlaku adalah dari segi perubahan dari segi penawaran. Dalam keadaan tekanan permintaan ke atas harga dah terkawal, saya tidak menjangka akan berlaku sebarang perubahan kepada OPR yang mana pada paras 3% ianya kekal pada paras yang normal dan ia dikira kondusif bagi menyokong pertumbuhan ekonomi negara.
Baik, itu adalah perkongsian daripada Abdul Muiz Warhalim, merupakan pakar ekonomi MIDF Research, dan semua perbincangan ini akan kami rangkumkan dalam astroawani.com. Dan saya akan teruskan dengan laporan seterusnya. GX Bank Berhad kini menyokong ciri pembayaran menggunakan kod QR Duit Now yang membolehkan transaksi dibuat dengan lebih mudah dan pantas. Kenyataan pada Rabu berkata ia bagaimanapun sedang dilancarkan secara berperingkat di kedua platform iOS dan Android.
After we've rolled out our debit card, now we're actually rolling out a QR Pay actually in this month. And along with that is we're running a referral program to also actually encourage customers who love what they see already to refer to family and friends. At the same time, Riot's coming, so we're coming up with a really festive campaign that will encourage customers to put more money with us.
Genap 111 hari dilancarkan, Ketua Pegawai Eksekutif GX Bank Pei Silai berkata sambutan sangat menggalakkan dengan lebih 200,000 pengguna berdaftar setakat ini. Tambahnya, GX Bank akan memperkenalkan beberapa program dalam masa terdekat bagi membantu mendapatkan jurang kewangan rakyat Malaysia dengan memanfaatkan teknologi sedia ada. Antara program tersebut termasuklah program rujukan atau referral program, kempen Raya Rezeki Aneka Poket dan Impian Gigih. Kesemua inisiatif ini adalah untuk merealisasikan impian GX Bank memacu keterangkuman kewangan serta menggalakkan literasi kewangan terutama untuk generasi akan datang. Dalam pada itu, Pay menyatakan keterujaan apabila disoal berkenaan kehadiran dua bank digital baharu iaitu Boost dan Ion Bank yang mendapat kelulusan Bank Negara Malaysia BNM untuk memulakan perkhidmatan pada awal tahun ini.
So we are excited that we're going to have more of our, peers and players actually coming into the industry. And I think truly, together, right, we'll be able to iterate and improve on the financial products and solutions for all Malaysians together.
Buat pertama kali sejak 2010, Malaysia Aviation Group MEG telah mencatatkan keuntungan bersih. Syarikat induk kepada Malaysia Airlines itu berjaya mencatat RM766 juta keuntungan bersih dan faedah berbanding kerugian bersih RM344 juta pada tahun sebelumnya. MEG induk kepada Malaysia Airlines ditubuhkan pada 2015 selepas pelan pemulihan kelima Malaysia Airlines.
Keuntungan bersih kumpulan itu mewakili perubahan hampir 1.1 bilion ringgit daripada niat negatif RM344 juta pada 2022. Prestasinya adalah pada pertumbuhan 31% dalam hasil sebanyak 13.85 bilion ringgit bagi tahun kewangan berakhir 31 Disember 2023. Pada tahun kewangan sebelumnya, ia mencatatkan pendapatan 10.61 bilion ringgit didorong trafik penumpang yang teguh. MEG berkata trafik dan kapasiti penumpang kumpulan itu masing-masing meningkat sebanyak 47% dan 61%. Kumpulan itu mencatatkan keuntungan operasi bersih RM899 juta, peningkatan 64% daripada RM540 juta tahun sebelumnya. Ia merupakan tahun kedua berturut-turut di mana MEG telah mencatatkan keuntungan operasi yang positif. MEG turut mempunyai simpanan tunai kukuh berjumlah RM4.3 bilion setakat 31 Disember 2023 tanpa menerima suntikan modal daripada pemegang saham utamanya Khazanah Nasional sejak Oktober 2021. Pengarah urusan kumpulan MEG, Datuk Izham Ismail berkata prestasi kukuh itu disumbangkan oleh jumlah trafik penumpang daripada segmen premium, aliran rangkaian antarabangsa yang dipergiat, pengurusan aktif kapasiti, kerjasama perkongsian mendalam dan hasil lebih kukuh dalam segmen penumpang.
Baik, kita teruskan dengan perkembangan ringgit Malaysia di mana ringgit meneruskan pengukuhannya berbanding dolar Amerika Syarikat pada akhir urus niaga Khamis, didorong oleh sentimen yang positif selepas Bank Pusat Amerika Syarikat dijangka tidak melaksanakan sebarang pengurangan kadar faedah dalam masa terdekat, kata penganalisis. Dan pada 6 petang ringgit meningkat kepada 4.7140 berbanding dolar Amerika Syarikat daripada paras 4.7335 semalam. Dan untuk kita lihat bagaimanakah prestasi nilai ringgit Malaysia setakat pagi ini, ia berada pada paras 4.734 dan ini adalah nilai ringgit Malaysia yang dapat kita saksikan setakat waktu pembukaan hari Jumaat pada 22 Mac 2024. Dan nilai ringgit Malaysia untuk kita lihat bagaimanakah pergerakannya dalam tempoh seminggu daripada 18 Mac sehinggalah hari ini, kita dapat lihat nilai ringgit Malaysia mengalami trend naik turunnya amat ketara. Apabila graf ini meningkat menunjukkan nilai ringgit Malaysia mengalami penyusutan ataupun kemerosotan, dan apabila graf ini menunjukkan penurunan, ia menunjukkan ringgit kita semakin kuat dan semakin mengukuh. Dan kita dapat saksikan nilai ringgit Malaysia pemulihan ia kekal antara berada 21 hinggalah 22 Mac. Namun pada waktu pembukaan ini kita dapat lihat nilai ringgit Malaysia kembali kepada trend penyusutan dan ia berada pada paras 4.734 dan ini adalah nilai ringgit Malaysia yang dapat kita saksikan setakat pagi ini. Dan saya akan beralih kepada perkembangan FBM KLCI di mana Bursa Malaysia yang mencatat penurunan selama 2 hari berturut-turut sebelum ini kembali meningkat sewaktu mengakhiri dagangan Khamis susulan aktiviti memburu saham-saham berharga rendah. Pada 5 petang, indeks petunjuk utama FTSE Bursa Malaysia KLCI naik 5.62 mata pada 1541.41 daripada 1535.79 semalam. Dan saya akan terus membawakan iaitu antara data daripada Market Watch yang menunjukkan FBM KLCI kita setakat pagi jam 9.26 pagi ia berada pada paras 1543.40 bersamaan 0.13%, peningkatan sebanyak 2.00, dan ini adalah prestasi Bursa Malaysia yang dapat kita saksikan setakat pagi 22 Mac 2024. Dan kalau kita ke belakang sedikit untuk lihat bagaimanakah prestasi FBM KLCI ataupun pergerakan Bursa Malaysia dalam tempoh 5 hari daripada hari Isnin minggu ini sehingga hari Jumaat, iaitu Bursa Malaysia kalau kita lihat iaitu mengalami paras yang peningkatan pada mula awal minggu ini. Isnin ia berada pada paras lebih kurang 1557.14 dan pada minggu ini perjalanan dia kita lihat trend yang perlahan-lahan menurun, trend Bursa Malaysia sehinggalah ia mencapai antara tahap yang terendah. Pada hari Khamis ia berada pada paras 1536.81, namun daripada hari Khamis hinggalah hari Jumaat kita dapat lihat perlahan-lahan prestasi Bursa Malaysia meningkat sehinggalah ia mencapai tahap terkini pada 1542.88, dan ini adalah prestasi FBM KLCI dan nilai ringgit Malaysia yang dapat kita saksikan setakat 22 Mac 2024. Dan selepas ini kita akan bersama Nabilah Khaleeda. Jangan ke mana-mana, kita akan berrehat seketika dan kembali selepas ini.
5 lelaki penghantar makanan didakwa di Mahkamah Majistret Bangi atas tuduhan membunuh seorang pemandu kereta lelaki dalam satu kejadian.
4 sungai di sekitar kawasan perindustrian Pasir Gudang di Johor termasuk Sungai Kim Kim didapati tercemar dan berada pada tahap yang membimbangkan. Kerajaan sudah mulakan inisiatif untuk menggantikan kenderaan operasinya kepada kenderaan elektrik EV dalam skala kecil terlebih dahulu.
Kita telah menunjukkan keberanian dan membuktikan kemampuan kita. Kini, nyauman yang lebih hebat.
Bangkit, harimau bangkit!
Percaya, inilah masanya untuk kita bersinar.
Itu dia gol!
Teruskan perjuangan. Tiada siapa yang boleh menghalang. Saksikan aksi Harimau Melayang secara langsung di Astro Arena, Arena Bola dan Astro Go.
Thank you for tuning in to Niaga AWANI, and right now we're going to shift our discussion towards property industry, a topic that has been widely discussed, especially the ever high selling prices. But today, right now, we want to bring the latest issue in the rise of sales and service tax or SST from 6 to 8%, and how will it impact the property acquisition. So to discuss further, joining me on the line is Sheldon Fernandez, the Country Manager of Property Guru Malaysia. Good morning, Sheldon.
Good morning, Nabilah. Thanks for having us.
All right, firstly, perhaps you can share to us how do you anticipate the rise of SST from 6 to 8 will impact or the overall affordability of houses, especially towards the low and middle income households?
Yeah, so the rise of the SST was much anticipated coming into 2024. And if you look at our consumer sentiment study that we did in the first half of 2024, about 60% of our respondents agreed that the increase in service tax that was introduced in the budget in 2024 will affect the cost of property and therefore the cost of them making the decision of buying a property. What I think we got to also understand that this increase in this service tax has a multiplier effect. So it's not a direct impact of the 2% increase, but overall transferred cost to the end purchaser. So, for example, Radar came out and said that they see an increase in raw materials, particularly going up, and therefore this will increase the property prices by about 10 to 15%. So that is a direct, or rather that's the multiplier impact, if you can, towards the end user. So this will lead to buyers obviously being more conscious about price, right? They'll become more price sensitive and therefore delay more decisions when it comes to buying, particularly because we already face an affordability challenge in the property market.
And of course, when the value is high, it's directed to all the potential buyers towards rental sector. So how do you foresee this trend of rental sector towards the upcoming years, or not just in 2024, but upcoming years and also the second half of the year, 2024?
Yeah, so because a house is a basic necessity, everybody got to live under one roof. So it's either, they purchase a property, but if they're not purchasing, then clearly they're going to rent. But the housing affordability issues have led to consumers obviously to pivot towards renting, at least in the short to medium term. And about half of our purchases surveys, respondents who did the survey, about half of them said that they will delay their purchasing decisions in the next 1 to 2 years. And the main reason behind that, a big 65% of those respondents basically said it is down to insufficient savings in order to purchase a property. So, clearly this is going to be a short to medium term reaction that we will see. However, even in the renting space, they face some challenges around location of which they want to rent. They have a budget about 1,500 ringgit when it comes to renting properties. 90% of those renting today also have that sort of a budget range. So all this we think will be a short to medium term trend that we will see, particularly if they're not buying, then they will definitely rent.
Like you said, even if it's a short to medium term, but what can we anticipate on the implications toward the property developers?
So yes, because in the property sector, it's really around the demand and supply, but obviously this is led by demand. So property developers clearly will need to take a very like-minded approach to where the demand is. And if you look at our demand that we track on the Property Guru and iProperty portal, we've seen a decline of 7.4%. But at the same time, 60% of our respondents have indicated that they are willing to go into the purchasing decision. So the intent to buy is there, but there's some real challenges around affordability. So as a developer, clearly you want to build properties that people want to buy, and therefore take a more data-driven approach. And this insight that we do from the consumer sentiment survey is one leading indicator around where the demand is going to be. About 60% of our respondents have said purchasing a home, one of the values that they will look at is about 400,000 ringgit and lower. That's an indication of where the demand is. Clearly, this is not a one-party effort. It's an ecosystem of players. There's the developers, there's government, there's banks that all come together towards helping the consumer own a property. I think greater public-private partnership is something that they can look at. Today, they have this cross-subsidy method that they use to build affordable housing. But I think a greater partnership with regulators, government, and banks would potentially help them move in the right direction to meet the demand that the consumers are ready for, which is property prices around 400,000 ringgit and lower.
And given another data that I could extract from the report is quarter-on-quarter decline of 7.4% in the sale demand index in fourth quarter of last year, 2023. So what strategies can we impose or perhaps adjustments of real estate the developers should adopt, considering that right now the economic situation and also the rising of interest rates especially?
Yeah, so as I said, I think this involves multiple stakeholders playing a role in it, and not just one party, which is a developer. So affordable housing or public housing is one foundation that we need to lay properly in order to help the industry grow, which is the property industry in general. So I think the government plays a crucial role down here in encouraging developers who build affordable housing projects. But clearly, they can help them with incentives and subsidies that will enable them to meet this demand. The other thing that we need to look at is also embracing sustainability in terms of the building practices. So you can leverage technology around greater cost control and cost measures in order to build properties. So these are areas that I think the stakeholders can play, and obviously banks, when it comes to responsible lending towards the stakeholders in terms of financing the project and affording this lending to the right project and the right developers.
And another thing that we can look at is balancing. There are some that want affordable house, but there are some people or a household that prefers to have value-oriented features and amenities. So how should developers adjust these offerings to align with this demand from different sectors or different demands from two different, like I said just now, affordability and also value-oriented features?
Yeah, so it's a very interesting question. I'm glad you asked it because we actually came up with a very interesting insight based on the respondent and the survey that we conducted. Because clearly there's a shift as we see when it comes to making these decisions, and the shift towards value-oriented property. So the survey basically said that 37 of our respondents, 37% of our respondents, and particularly from the middle income households, are willing to forego certain amenities in order to ensure that the property that they eventually move in can be affordable. So things like, a yoga deck or a jacuzzi or a tennis court or even a swimming pool or gym for that matter, these are the amenities that they're willing to forego. So that was a very interesting insight to see the consumer mindset shift to ensure they can play a part as well in a value-oriented property. So a property that focuses on essential and therefore allow them to be within the budget in order for them to afford the property. So this is something the developers can clearly consider because amenity does increase cost. More space takes up building amenities, the more cost is incurred. But if you can build more basic features that the consumers are demanding for, then hopefully that can be within an affordable range that will meet the demand and the supply, which is really the key factors when it comes to the property market.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. But from the report as well, another thing that we can look at is on the project delays, low construction quality, sick and also abandoned projects. So how should developers as well as governments can do, or perhaps what strategy can we impose to build bioconfidence and also prevent project setbacks?
So yeah, so the reason why we call it a consumer sentiment survey is because property is very sentimental in that aspect. But it's really around the confidence that the buyers have in the industry, or in order to make that big decision that they need to make of owning the property. So whenever you have project delays, or in recent years we've seen the government categorized as sick projects, all these causes reputation impact in the industry, and therefore brings down confidence. So I think, this doesn't help the industry in general, but clearly some responsibility needs to be on the burden of a developer, that if they do embark on the project, to ensure that it's completed well, handed over well, and obviously ensure that the residents, when they move in, they have the right living condition maintained well in order to ensure a sustained environment for a good living condition.
But there are actually two enforcement by authorities, that is defect liability period, DLP, and also developers guarantee fund. So how feasible are these proposals, and what steps can be taken to support this enforcement?
So I think this exactly that. I think this underscores the need for a responsible environment where regulators are playing their part, stricter enforcement clearly. But all these play the role in terms of the end user having entered into making this purchase decision of a large sector, ensure that they have eventually have an ownership of a good property that they can live in good living conditions. And I don't think this is just down to developers. I think if you look at the government and their focus around ensuring that there's a greater focus around sustainable living when it comes to public housing moving forward. Even government is looking at their role that they're playing to ensure that the build type of affordable housing continues to meet the standards and of where the demand from the consumer is. So greater enforcement clearly, and yes, there was in our survey a high 60% about the need for developers, the DLP period to be extended. So that whenever defects are identified, they're well taken care of. But also around the developer guarantee fund, basically protecting the interest of the buyer when it comes to any potential impact that they may experience when it comes to ownership of the property.
All right, we've talked about all the challenges that we face in the property sector, but another thing is how can developers actually practice sustainable practices into their projects while maintaining affordable house, but at the same time, what can they do, or perhaps what incentive to support potential buyers to facilitate this transition?
I think, we talked about good governance, developer playing responsibility when it comes to, as soon as they launch a project, ensure that it's fully built, well built, and then hand over. But regulators play a role down here in terms of enforcement as well. They can also look, when it comes to good governance in terms of how they match the demand and the supply. We talked a lot around what the consumers want, the interesting insights around the consumer making a focus towards a value-oriented property. So these are the decisions that they can make going into, building the properties that meet those demands. But clearly, when it comes to property, it's not just about the purchasing decision. Eventually, it's about the cost of ownership, the maintenance of the property, and therefore everything that they build for need to ensure that it's sustainable and moving along, and obviously, meeting that demand in the longer sustainable period.
Okay, maybe another thing, or perhaps other challenges that you see. Perhaps we've talked about high cost of living, high cost of the cost of affordable houses as well. But what are other challenges, perhaps, that stops potential buyers from buying houses, or perhaps rent houses, and also that stop or prevent from collaborative efforts from the governments and also developers?
Well, I think when it comes to owning a property, whilst we look at affordability, that is one. The other thing is obviously income levels. And I think, this is where the government is focusing on in terms of job creation, increasing the minimum wage, looking at minimum wage policies. And I think this is moving in the wrong direction, because whilst you tackle affordability in the short term, what you want to have is a vibrant open market environment where, the demand and supply takes care of itself. So one way to look at it is, the income levels, the job creation. Unemployment rate in Malaysia is still low, and that's good. In the long run, it helps with property sector. As income grows, as the gap between property price and income narrows, and within a manageable range, then I think you have a very vibrant open market. But the foundation of it all is affordable housing, and you can see steps taken and focus taken in terms of ensuring that we're moving in that direction around tackling affordable housing. If you look at some of the schemes available out there, a lot of our buyers have clearly indicated that they need government help when it comes to affordable housing. They're very open towards the Nagani housing scheme. You've obviously got other things like Tehmina, you've got Project Perumahan Rakyat, you've got Rumah Selangor. So all these incentives actually help buyers get into the property ownership decision and actually own the properties. But it does take good governance and financial responsibility also from the consumer side. And one way is to ensure that they have good jobs and good training.
Of course, we want to see the synergy between the governments, the industry players, and also house developers to always collaborate efforts to not just overcome these challenges, but also to foster a resilient and equitable property market ecosystem as a whole. So thank you so much to Sheldon Fernandez, the Country Manager of Property Guru Malaysia. Hope to speak to you soon.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your time, Nabilah.
...222 wakil rakyat melontar hujah suara rakyat, bergema di bangunan keramat demi amanah juga mandat. Ikuti liputan inklusif sidang Parlimen bersama
saya, Umawati Ramaya.
Saya, Hasimi Muhammad.
Dan saya, Idaudin Daud. Hanya di Astro AWANI.
Hello and welcome to Niaga Spotlight with me, Tehmina Kaoosji. Niaga Spotlight goes to the week in business and future affairs. Market watch analysis on so many industries. This is what we've got here on Niaga Spotlight every week. Well, this week we're actually going to be covering future affairs and looking at something which is a very interesting topic indeed, investing in your 40s. Now, it's really interesting to note that according to the EPF, Malaysians require at least around R1 million saved away by the time they're ready to retire. However, this is not true of most of the projections that we have been seeing of late. So, joining me to discuss this topic in depth is Joseph Cherian, Deputy CEO and Professor of Practice and Finance with the Asia School of Business. Joe, how are you today? Welcome to studios.
I'm fine, thank you.
Fantastic. So let's get the ball rolling, Joe. I really wanted to ask you, when individuals enter their 40s, financial priorities often shift. What are your thoughts about what we should be looking at as Malaysians, all things considered, in the first Q of 2024?
Okay, it's a good question because 40s is a critical stage in your life. But to me, investing and savings is a life cycle decision. It should take place throughout your lifetime. And the 40s may be a point at which you hit certain events. Some people get married, or they may have a kid, or they may buy a house, and so on. So that can be life-changing. So you need to review and see how your portfolio allocation is with respect to your remaining life cycle. Mm-hmm. So what I would say is that we need to always look at this investing and financial decision-making thing throughout your life cycle. And then so that means like every 2 to 3 years, review and see how are you reaching your life goals? Are you reaching your career goals and so on? And how do you adjust your investment style based on that? But the events in your life are what dictate when you have to make major revisions. Sure. Whether you're a stockbroker or a newscaster, you have to have different asset allocation. It's not 40. It's your job, your career, your circumstances that define your life goals.
Absolutely. Now, I think it's really interesting that you have actually taken the approach of looking at it as a life cycle opportunity, not just something that begins when you're in your 40s, right? And I wanted to zone in on the fact that according to, once again, EPF statistics, about 45% of Malaysians will not even have 100,000 ringgit in savings upon retirement, which is far lesser than half of the 240,000 ringgit threshold that has been set by EPF. So perhaps we'll backtrack a little as we discuss what is it that is preventing, or what do you think are some of the factors impacting Malaysians having so little in savings according to the most recent trends and data?
Yeah, the statistics are even worse than you projected. In fact, one statistics I saw from the Ministry of Finance showed that more than 50% have less than 10,000 before hitting the age of 55. So which means they just don't have enough to save. The rich are okay, they have their savings. It's just the lower income and middle income that are suffering. Now, this is a pretty sad problem that we've ended up with, because EPF was one of the most respected retirement savings scheme in the world. We started very early on, we saved a lot, but the problem is, it's not the returns weren't good. The returns are excellent. As we know, the EPF manages our money very well and gives us a very good return. Mm-hmm. It's because we have this temptation to dig into our pot. And that causes problems for different purposes, whether it's for housing or, exigencies or a pandemic. We had multiple layers of digging into your pot. That really affects your long-term returns. In order for you to accumulate R1 million or even the 240,000 ringgit threshold, you need to keep the money intact and let it have a long runway to grow. You can't be digging into your pot. But this is a temptation many countries face. It's not just Malaysia. So it's a role of government to ensure that people don't have this temptation to dig into the pot. Now, your corollary to that would be, how about exigencies? Well, in most countries, when there's an exigency like a pandemic or flood, you don't ask people to dig into their savings for retirement. The government provides the right transfers to help people who need the help, most. So it's the role of government to provide.
And I think, of course, I'm sitting here now in Q2 of 2024. In retrospect, those were definitely some unsound decisions that were made. But of course, we had transitions of several different governments during that time in Malaysia. But now going back to the median population age of Malaysia, Joe, which is about 30.8 years. So would you say that actually might be the right time for young Malaysians to start thinking about strategies and even considering, I need to start saving, rather than also giving into the temptation of credit cards and so many other things which have come up over the past 3 to 5 years?
Right. So Tehmina, good points you raise. It's never too late to start saving. You should have started earlier on. That means
Fair.
at the point you enter into the workforce, you should start saving for retirement.
So mid-20s then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But even at 40, it's not too late. All you need is a long enough runway, which means you should not be dying to retire at the age of 55. In most Western countries, the retirement age is close to 70.
Correct. We're
Here,
still locked in at 60.
60, I know,
Yes.
but the thing is everyone's thinking about retirement at the age of 55, right?
Fair.
So I don't know what's it about Asians. In America, where I lived most of my life, people love to work a lifetime, but over here, everyone's thinking of retiring. So if you have a shortage of savings, you need to lengthen your runway for savings, which means working longer. I know it's an unpopular thing to say, but think about extending your working lifespan to the age of 65 or 68 or whatever. 60 is just a benchmark, but there's no reason why you can't go on to 65 or 68.
Fair enough. And because you picked up on the fact that you did spend a lot of your working life as a professional overseas, what are the differences that you've observed between perhaps Western and Eastern or Asian approaches to financial investments, particularly when people are coming on this critical decade of their lives, their 40s?
Okay, so first of all, let me clarify, I am Malaysian, so I'm an Easterner at heart. But
Sure.
unfortunately, I spent very large span of my lifetime in the West, and only in one country, the USA. So what I observe is they're bigger risk takers. They care more about themselves, very individualistic, which means they care about their retirement, not so much their kids or their relatives' retirement or society's retirement.
Fair.
They are willing, as I think I said it, they're willing to take risks, which means try new opportunities after they retire. Try on a new job. I mean, whether it's becoming an artist or whether it's doing work at a university.
Doing a passion project.
Some passion project. You know, they're always looking at other sources of keeping busy and maybe earning some income from it. So that's the US style. They're willing to reverse mortgage their home.
Fair
To
enough.
reverse mortgage your home, you need to also kick out your kids out of the house. They have no problems kicking their kids out of their house. Here in Asia, and this is not just unique to Malaysia, I've seen this in Hong Kong, Singapore, Malaysia, so I'm not picking on any country. We are so concerned about what relatives would say if we fail, so don't take so much risk, right? Secondly, we are worried about retiring at the age of 55, or 60. That has to go away. We need to work longer, especially if you're healthy, because idle mind is a sad thing to waste. You know what I'm saying? You need to be occupied because people are living longer, and you have to live up with that. So, work longer because you're living longer, right? And you're healthy as well, take care of your health and stuff like that. The other thing is we are too much, I think it's very good that we care about family and society and we have the filial
and we'll be
piety.
digging a lot deeper into that in a bit about all the responsibilities that come with
it
that.
can also be an albatross on your shoulder in the sense that
Sure.
you will not be making optimal decisions in your own interest and then end up being a burden to society because you've made some bad decisions because of being an Easterner. You see what I'm
Exactly.
saying?
I'll pick up on that thread a little
Okay.
later, particularly regarding the fact that Malaysia also has a very high incidence of NCDs, non-communicable diseases, and roughly 1 in every 2 adults actually has an NCD. That also adds a different layer of requiring assisted care, medical expenses, etc., which generally is clocking in at about roughly a decade towards end of life. But back to a different topic now first, Joe. So let's look at fluctuations in the value of the ringgit. And of course, the ringgit has not been doing too well of late, but how is that impacting investment strategies, and ought it to affect investment strategies, or should people still continue looking at opportunities?
Okay, fortunately, I'm a US dollar investor, and I know your audience will not care for that. So the ringgit has worked in my favor, but that's a problem. It doesn't work in the favor of Malaysians who are invested in ringgit. So the ringgit has depreciated quite a bit, which is good for the economy as well, because it has this mercantile effect, which basically means we can export more and our economy can have healthier GDP growth numbers because we're exporting more, right? Because our ringgit is cheaper, and that brings in a lot of foreign exchange. But the general feeling of well-being reduces. When you travel to Japan, Japan is a bad example because they are also in as bad shape as us, the yen that is. Australia or
Fair.
UK or America, where our ringgit has depreciated so much, you feel very poor. So the general sense of well-being goes down. So it's not good, right? But at the same time, the benefits to it, as I said, if you're in the export sector, you work in the export sector, good for you. You're going to do very well. That's why you can see a lot of investments coming in through the chip sector, semiconductors.
Very much so,
billions. Our government is bringing
Indeed.
Billions in because they find this is a great place to invest, good return on their money, right? So what you need to do to fight this is to hedge currency risk. But 99% of your audience don't know how to hedge currency risk, I assume. So what you need to do is talk to your banker and open up foreign currency accounts. If it's allowed, I think it's allowed in Malaysia that you can have multiple currency accounts and maybe save in different currencies for the diversification factor. And maybe we can talk about diversification as well along the way.
Yeah.
So you need to also diversify your currencies. And Malaysia, if I'm not mistaken, the banks do allow you to open up accounts in different currencies. So if you have a diversified set of developed countries, whether the benchmark currencies like sterling pounds, US dollar, Australian dollar, it gives you some amount of hedging, natural hedging, as opposed to try and put on a hedge through a futures market or something.
Yeah, fair enough. And that's one way of looking at investing in the lower for longer ringgit, right?
Correct.
And also at the OPR environment. One last area, if we could touch on this for a while, Joe. Now, retirement planning also becomes increasingly important in your 40s. And what do you feel are some main key areas that individuals need to be focusing on, specifically concerning, as we've already briefly discussed, the fact that especially as Asians, we tend to be looking at familial well-being or other responsibilities and not necessarily focusing on, number one.
Yeah. So nothing wrong with looking after your family. I look after my family too. So there's nothing wrong with that, nothing wrong with filial piety, but I'm just saying you want to be sure that you take care of yourself first because you don't want to be a burden to others and society. So you need to save up as much as you can for retirement. That's the first thing. And you also need to ensure that you are willing to monetize assets at your disposal to supplement your retirement income. And there are ways to do that. Your home, if you have enough equity in the home, let's say you have 100% equity in the home, you can actually install a reverse mortgage with Chagamas and get retirement income there from that source in your retirement. I can talk about that if your viewers are interested, how you can supplement your income through monetization programs. The problem is we want to bequeath this home to our progenitors or bloodline,
Fair
right?
enough, yes.
And because of that, we will be willing to sacrifice a home for a future generation as opposed to taking care of ourselves by monetizing the value of our house. I found this problem quite puzzling when I first came back. It's not a Malaysian problem, it's a Singapore problem, it's a generic Asian problem.
Regional issue and approach,
because
perhaps.
we want to save that house for our children, grandchildren, but I'm asset rich and cash poor.
Yes.
How about converting that assets to cash, monetize it? It's very common in the West to do this. It's common practice. But here I find people a bit more reticent. They'd rather be hard up and live a tough life and sacrifice than try to get more comfortable in retirement by monetizing their home. And as I mentioned, Chagamas actually offers a reverse mortgage program now.
Very interesting. Thanks so much for sharing that, Joe. So we'll pause there for a little bit. We'll be right back after a quick break. Stay with us right here on Niaga Spotlight.
Ayo bersama Astro Rewards untuk sesi more. Terokai Astro Fiber. Menangi hadiah eksklusif di lokasi berikut dan jadi di antara 100 yang pertama untuk tebus hidangan kencang. Masa anugerah terindah, jumpa di sana.
Daulat Tuanku.
Welcome back to Niaga Spotlight, still with me, Tehmina Kaoosji, and today, of course, we've been discussing investing in your 40s. Prof, so let's move on into looking at the importance of diversifying assets, because this is also often recommended as another strategy which especially those in their 40s can jump on.
Yeah, I think a general problem I've found when I talk to my friends and family and relatives since coming back is everyone thinks they are stock experts. They want to buy counters based on rumors, friends calling up, or what they read in the papers. I think we should try to avoid the temptation. When you save away for retirement or for future needs, you need to be as diversified as possible. And what I advise my friends and relatives is buy low cost, highly diversified funds, you know, and you can do that. You can go to all the different, I'm not going to promote any funds here since I'm not paid by them. But what I'm saying is that just call up the banks and find out what do they charge on the fees. You have a right to ask, what's your management fee? What's your sales load? There should be zero sales load, and the management fee should be as low as possible.
And a right to that kind of professional advice rather than taking it all in your hands.
Correct. You should go to an advisor who has got fiduciary responsibility to look out for your interest. That's very important. Not a broker, because they're paid on commissions. That's their job. You can't blame them. So they'll sell you the highest fee product because that benefits them, right? But they may not benefit the client. But a financial advisor with fiduciary responsibility, usually it's regulated, they are regulated, they have an interest to look out for the client. So they will probably recommend the best funds, as they are agnostic. They're not paid on fees or brokerage, but they're paid on advice. Okay, so I would recommend go for diversified funds. Do not buy individual counters. But if you have anything over and above that's surplus money that you can play with, sure, go and do the punting or whatever you want to do. But there should be a baseline amount put into diversified funds. It works for me. It worked for me over the years. And I'm used to be in the banking industry. I mean, I used to be in investments, and I'm considered an expert in investing. But when it came to my personal investing, I just socked it away into diversified low-cost funds. Over the years, it's done very well for me. It doesn't protect you from market downturns.
Fair enough.
But it will definitely mitigate the amount of loss your portfolio suffers.
Especially if you're chasing after those high net worth and high value ones.
Correct. Correct. Yeah.
All right. Point well taken. Joe, moving along from there into looking at debt management, which also becomes a more crucial aspect of financial planning, as of course responsibilities do pile on as we age. So what should be some of the priority areas in this arena, debt management?
Okay, so everything should be looked at holistically at the portfolio level. It's not just investments, but it's also debt management. So institutions, especially the sophisticated financial institutions, hedge funds, pension funds, look at it at what's called asset liability management. So they don't just talk about asset management, it's asset liability. That means also make sure what debts you have, what interest payments you're making, and so on, and then make that holistic portfolio decision. Somehow when it trickles down to the individual level, we forget about asset liability management. We keep them as separate things. Investments is one thing, debt is another thing.
Right.
And that's where you do not do the trade-offs. So you may end up borrowing on your credit card at 28% per annum, which makes no sense to me, and then earning only 3% return on the portfolio side, right? What you should do is, first of all, pay off that 28% negative cash flow.
Fair.
Before you try to earn a meager 3%. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
It's a trade-off,
you're
right?
chasing after, the single digits, but you're piling on 28 every single year.
Yeah. So that doesn't make sense. That's so that's where, to your point, we need to look at both sides of the equation. How do we end up in debt? And Malaysians have a lot of debt.
Yes,
car
we do.
loans, house loans, buying things you cannot afford, or what
BNPL, which is the latest, buy now, pay later trend.
That's a global trend, right?
Absolutely.
It's not just Malaysia. It's very deceptive, these things, because you do not incur a pain now, and then the pain comes later, and then you find out it's accumulated and you can't afford to pay it. So there are many ways to get indebted heavily. It's very bad. I mean, I personally try to tell people, while debt is good as part of the, you get sometimes tax offsets from it, it helps you do things you would not have been able to pursue without the borrowing element.
Fair.
But still, be careful, don't be overwhelmed, do it prudently, take on debt carefully, and make sure you look at it as a portfolio context. That means consider all the debt and payouts you're making on the liability side, along with the investments. Look at it holistically. And that's where a financial advisor can help you as you put all the cards on the table, looking at the assets and the liabilities.
Especially considering that we've got so many options now, and perhaps it's easier and quicker to get that financial advice.
Yep, and I add one more thing, Tehmina. My parents actually always brought me up saying, live within your means. It's never more accurate. It's a phenomenon everywhere.
I think we're slowly coming back to that rationale, though, you know, after having
we have to live within our means. And secondly, you also don't want to buy the house that you can't afford, right? You buy one that's affordable, so don't take on too much of a mortgage just because you want to get that mansion or whatever. So I think the living within your means is very important advice in these days.
Very prudent indeed. And because you were just mentioning housing and buying houses, let's look at now a different aspect of expanding one's portfolio, real estate. So it can also play a significant part in a diversified portfolio. And what considerations should individuals in their 40s look at, specifically when they're looking at it as an investment?
Okay, first of all, make sure you have a roof over your head. So real estate from that context is very useful.
Fair.
Because you save on the imputed rental income. Instead of paying rental income, you have a roof over your head and an asset that usually, not always, appreciates in value, right, over time. It's not necessary, but the fact is, generally speaking, these assets inflate over time. Now, that said, real estate is a good diversifier, and it should be considered as part of your portfolio. So if you put 10% or 20% of your wealth aside for real estate, that's the amount of real estate exposure in your total portfolio. That should be taken into account. You can't put it into a different pocket. That's part of the overall portfolio. So let me give you an example. If I have a house, I own a house, and I have the rest of my assets invested in equities and fixed income, I would think twice about taking money out of the equities or fixed income portion and putting into REITs. I don't know if you all have REITs here, but these are real estate investment trusts.
Correct.
Real estate investment trusts are pooled vehicles that are investing in real estate. So now I own a house that's worth about, say, 20% of my portfolio, and then I go buy another 10% of REITs. Now I have 30% of my assets in real estate. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
It basically, you have to take that into consideration. Do you really want to have 30% exposure to real estate? So I am a believer in real estate, and as a diversifier, but just do it prudently. Don't overlook the double counting of real estate assets, because some of the assets you count as you buy may be also real estate property developers, right? So they're also highly correlated to the real estate market. So you may have a lot of unintended exposure to real estate. Now, of course, if you want to be a landlord in Klang Valley, you want to go buy all the abandoned homes in Bangsa and different areas, go ahead and do that. That's your passion. That's okay. But go into it with your eyes wide open.
Fair enough. And I like the fact that you re-emphasized on the availability of REITs, because I don't think too many people, especially those who are younger, are looking at that as even an option when they are considering real estate. Perhaps we could end on one very important aspect of, not just saving, but also investment that comes up in most lifespans: education funding for children. Now, this, of course, is a concern for so many parents, and according to most recent estimates, raising a child in Malaysia costs anywhere between 400,000 ringgit to R1 million, all the way from the birth of the child to, in particular, university fees, where the bulk of the expenses are. How can young parents or young people better plan financially for the education needs that will probably be coming up in a decade or even two or so?
Okay, can I kill two birds with one stone, Tehmina?
Absolutely.
Yeah, education and healthcare. So in America and in many other countries, including Singapore, you have different tax advantage savings buckets for education, for future, and healthcare. So we need to do both. So I'll talk about education, but think also that it can also apply in the case of healthcare.
Fair enough.
Setting up tax advantage accounts to pay for your medical expenses in retirement or the insurance required in retirement, right? So on the education part, again, the US has got what's called 529 plans. It's an education savings plan that's fully tax advantage. And if you take it out to pay for your kids' education, you don't pay any taxes on it. So it actually can grow at a very good rate, just like an EPF or whatever, at a high rate if you invest it in markets and other good investments. And then it can be used for payment. For education. So we need to think of setting that up in Malaysia, the government through the EPF or whatever, an education sleeve that people can save specifically over and above the retirement sleeve.
Sure.
For education, right? That means it's tax advantage. So you're going to increase the amount of tax benefits you're going to give to the individual. Now that said, education is a bit of a scam. Sorry, I'm a professor, but I'm just telling you, it's getting very unaffordable.
It is getting, exactly.
Yeah, and
particularly private universities, which are increasingly an option and more attractive to parents, and they're even considering it all the way from primary, secondary school.
Absolutely. I think Malaysia, I've seen more of America, where the cost of education has just gone through the roof.
Spiraling, yes.
So it's, in my view, I always believe in democratization, whether it's buying assets off the stock market or alternative investments, or whether getting an education. You need to democratize the process. We need to bring the cost of education down so more people can get educated. In fact, MIT, our sister organization, who are we in collaboration with, had a program where Syrian refugees in Jordan could learn from MIT through the online platform.
Right.
And some of them went on to get their, what they call micromasters at MIT. I mean, think about it. These people would have been neglected if they were not given this opportunity by MIT to get the education. I went to MIT. I went there physically to bricks and mortar to get my glorified degree in engineering. Sure. You know what I'm saying? Now you have a Syrian refugee in Jordan having that same opportunity. What if we could do this more widely to everyone? Not just to Syrians in Jordan, but to the villager in Sarawak or Sabah or in Kelantan, you know. All of them have equal opportunity to the best education. We need to have a mix of technology, make it more affordable, scale it up, and there won't be any privilege anymore, in the sense that the privilege seems to get more benefits towards education. They can afford the tuition, and then they say it's meritocracy. You know, it's meritocracy. I mean, come on. You have privilege, so you get meritocracy because you could go for tuition and all the other aid. I want every villager in every town in Malaysia to have that same opportunity, and you have to use technology. And we are pioneering some of that at ASB. We're trying to bring that. You know, we came from all the top schools, and we feel it's time to get that knowledge down to the district level, to the village level. Let's start in Malaysia, then we can go to other parts of the world. So we hope to do that through our programs as well. We're using technology, remote learning, with in-person experience. You can't remove the in-person experience. That means that Syrian refugee in Jordan has to at some point go to MIT or ASB or whatever, the school I'm at. But most of it is delivered through online means, and because that's a lot cheaper with technology.
Exactly. And I think what you're really speaking over here alludes to the fact that, you know, we need to ensure that there's access, and that barriers to access in particular are broken down, because ultimately when we're speaking about investing in your 40s or at any age really, this is only really going to apply to a fairly small proportion of the Malaysian working population. Joe, I could honestly go on for a lot more, but thank you so much for your time and insights. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Same here. Thank you.
Well, that's all we have time for today on Niaga Spotlight. I'm Tehmina Kaoosji signing off for now. We'll see you next Friday with more business analysis and insights. Here's to a productive week ahead.